Tonight, Minnesota is mourning the loss of a Vikings great. Legendary Vikings coach and Hall of Famer Bud Grant has died. Grant passed away this morning at 95 years old. He was so well known in the Twin Cities community and across the state. Grant was the Vikings head coach for 18 seasons, leading the team to their 4 Super Bowl appearances, and he is known as the most successful coach in franchise history. That is, of course, our top story tonight at 5 and our headline for tonight's newscast. Tonight, we remember Coach Grant and his impact on the community and so many Vikings fans and players throughout history. Dawn Mitchell is with us tonight as we remember such an important person in Minnesota sports history. Dawn?
Yes, thank you, Karen. Of course, when someone as iconic and legendary as Bud Grant passes away, you reach out to the men that knew him the best, and actually the men that played for him, that knew a side of him that we've all heard about, but perhaps never had to live. And joining me now is a man who needs no introduction, the legendary Carl Eller. Carl, thank you so much for not only coming here to share your stories tonight, but trudging through the snow and being here, because you said that you wanted to honor Bud, and I really love that about you.
Well, Bud's a very special person. I'm glad you asked me. I think you need a Bud Grant in your life. Everyone should have a kind of Bud Grant in their life because he's a pretty straight guy. You know, everybody says that, and if you want to know where to go, how to do it, ask Bud. He would always give you the straight answer for that.
And he would stare you down with those steely blue eyes, wouldn't he?
Yes, he would. Yeah. So, but anyway, he was a man of few words, and his theme of mine is like you could always trust what he would say because he wouldn't change it regardless of who you were. If you didn't like it, you just didn't like it, you know. But most of them was really good advice for me in a way, and I'm sorry to see him go.
I am as well. And you were super close. We have pictures that you have shared with us, not only from your 80th birthday party, happy birthday, but Bud's, and also most recently, just a couple of weeks ago, when you were all on a panel together, right? As recent as 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, it was very recent, and we had the chance to talk, you know, and that was, I think, getting to warm up a little or just be more on a level where we could kind of talk and Bud would say something that would, the current events, something like that. And it was a real pleasure to talk with Bud in that manner because I always before I had such respect for him. It was always like, it was in an official position.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, in the official position, defensive end as you were, you only get to be that good sometimes by some man that's pushing you. And the Purple People Eaters, well known. When Bud was your coach, what perhaps was the best story, whether it was he was pushing you or if he was giving you like the soft love that we might not have seen?
You know, I really have to think about that. I think that Bud was really consistent. And, I think his consistency was the best thing because he treated everybody the same. I've had other players tell me that they like being here because of that, because Bud really didn't play favorites. And it changed because his idea was that you never know when you're going to make the key play or when you have the key play for the game. And we could see that happen from week after week. Some of the players would be in just for a couple of plays, but they'd make a great catch or a first down and keep the ball alive. And after a while, we began to believe in Bud really greatly.
Carl, I've known you a long time, and when you came in today and it was snowing, I'm surprised you weren't trying to wear a polo shirt like Bud did in that legendary coin flip. He was tough as nails, huh?
Bud was tough as nails. He was tougher than nails. And he liked to really do that. And maybe, who knows how sincere he was? I think he was sincere. but it would be snowing, and he'd bring the team up. He would lead the team up, and would not have a shirt on his sleeves or anything. And so, later on, I wondered if he did that to kind of psych the other team or not, or if he was really just being Bud, you know.
Is there any piece of advice that he gave you, whether it was football or in life, that has really resonated with you and stuck with you over these years?
He did. He gave me a piece of advice, and I think it's like, it's hard to interpret, but for me, I knew what he meant. He was kind of like, you don't know who your friends are. It was kind of summed up like that, you know. I was kind of being, always being on guard, kind of speak, so to speak. And I thought that was good because, you know, we would do TV or we would do radio or newspaper or anything. So it was like, don't talk your enemy down, your opponents down. And because you never know when it'll come back to haunt you, you know. So I got that piece of advice, and it's still good to face.
Well, my condolences to you. Not only was Bud your friend, but he was your coach in your life for a long time. You know, I adore you, so thank you so much for coming in, and thank you for sharing these beautiful words.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. It was just a great honor to be here, and it's a sad occasion, but thank you very much.
Absolutely. Carl Eller, everyone. We will send this back to you, Karen. Just beautiful words on this very difficult day for many here in Minnesota and beyond.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you for sharing those important words. We appreciate it. Well, the Vikings posting to Twitter this morning saying, "We are absolutely devastated to announce legendary Minnesota Vikings head coach and Hall of Famer Bud Grant has passed away this morning at the age of 95. We, like all Vikings and NFL fans, are shocked and saddened by this terrible news." The Wilf family issuing a statement following Bud Grant's death saying, in part, "No single individual more defined the Minnesota Vikings than Bud Grant. A once-in-a-lifetime man, Bud will forever be synonymous with success, toughness, the North, and the Vikings." Words can never truly describe Bud's impact on this franchise and this community. We join members of the Vikings organization, the generations of players Bud impacted, the people of Minnesota, and the entire NFL in mourning this monumental loss. Now, his impact on football spans so much further than just on the field. Over the years, he's touched so many people in our community. We want to bring in Corin Hoggard now. And Corin, he had such an impressive career as a head coach, but life after football was also very, very special.
That's right, Karen. Bud Grant is just part of the fabric here in Minnesota. He lived in the same house from the day he moved to Minneapolis. He loved the outdoors, he embraced cold weather, as Carl mentioned, and he hid a tender heart behind a tough exterior.
Bud is Minnesota. You know, when people think of Bud, it's not just the Vikings, it's that look, it's that handsome man, it's that stoic face, it's that determination.
Bud Grant wasn't born in Minnesota, but he got here as fast as he could. Whether he shaped the state in his image or vice versa is a question for the ages, but the Golden Gopher became a Minneapolis Laker and then a Vikings legend and NFL Hall of Famer. The winningest coach in team history took the Vikings to 4 Super Bowls and lost them all. But he didn't dwell on defeat, one of the first life lessons he taught sportscaster Mark Rosen.
People would say, well, you lost those Super Bowls, you must be still stewing about it. I'm not going to worry about things I can't control.
Grant's life after coaching kept him around the Vikings, where he still has an office resembling the one he had decades ago. And he still tried to boost the team, like when he did the coin toss at a January playoff game, determined to intimidate the visiting Seahawks. Senator Amy Klobuchar was at the game and saw Grant walk out in short sleeves despite a wind chill around -30.
When I talked to him about it later, he goes, "Yeah, I knew what I was doing." He understood that he was a symbol not only of football and the Vikings, he was a symbol of Minnesota grit.
That grit extended to his financial life. He was a tough negotiator, even at the garage sales he hosted at his home for several years.
Don't push and shove.
He didn't go for haggling, but he welcomed memorabilia seekers with an open door.
You know, he grew up in the Depression, so he had appreciation for the dollar and what it meant and the save. And he lived the roughest of rough lives growing up. He was hustling all the time. You know, you never really lose that, but at the same time, he had a humane side to him that was so relatable again that people gravitated to Bud. I mean, he's Bud.
Friends remember Grant's dedication to his family and his love of the outdoors. And they know most people never saw the softy he could be with his inner circle. But when his best friend, the sports journalist Sid Hartman, passed away in 2020, Chad Hartman says you couldn't miss his sensitive side. Grant wasn't feeling well, but he made it to the funeral.
Bud was determined to get out of the car, tears coming down his eyes, telling my father how much he loved him. Somewhere today, I envision those two back together again and sharing great stories.
Hopefully that's the case. And the other life lesson he taught Rosen was to never make a decision before you have to. Grant was actually supposed to be in an event earlier this week to honor a longtime Vikings employee. And when he decided not to go, his close friends were very concerned. Karen.
Great story, Corin. Thank you. So many people from around Minnesota, the NFL, the football community in Canada, and across the country are remembering the life, legacy, and impact of Coach Bud Grant tonight. Many people recalling interactions with the coach, memories of him watching coach the Purple People Eaters in the 1970s, and the things he would do in his community. His death impacting so many Minnesotans today. Over the years, Bud Grant has received a number of honors, including being inducted into the NFL Hall of Fame. Last year, Coach Bud Grant was honored at the Minnesota History Center. Our Rob Olson takes us back to 2022 when his portrait was revealed at the Minnesota Historical Society.
Sometimes I don't realize how old I am, and I'm starting to look older when I look in the mirror every day.
At 94, Bud Grant is as humble as ever. No ego from the man who, if Minnesota had a Mount Rushmore of sports, he'd be the President Washington.
I think I was in Europe at the time, and I was having a conversation.
So when Mark Balma, a Minnesotan who's painted 4 presidential portraits and 3 prime ministers, was asked who was at the top of his wish list, his mind went back to those Sunday afternoons of his youth.
The person that came to mind right away was Bud Grant. I thought of him as a statesman of the sports field, and since I had done all these official portraits, it seemed like, yeah, he had that kind of quality.
And so it became that at Bud's old office at Winter Park, the two sat 12 separate times as Mark painstakingly captured Bud Grant on canvas.
And a perfectionist, by the way. So when he says we sit, I'd come back to Mark, what did we do? What didn't we do last time? Well, your eyebrow, you got so. That's what makes a great artist, I'm sure.
And through their conversations about Super Bowls and about hunting and about painting, he found the essence of Bud.
And I tried to represent him in this pose that he does when he's thinking and he's thoughtful.
I'm more of a thinker than a talker, and I don't always express myself verbally or written, but I'm thinking a lot.
Though the portrait was finished 3 years ago, it didn't have a home until now. Finally presented to the Minnesota Historical Society to be put on display.
It's hard to express just exactly what it does mean to an old man.
And Bud, with his family looking on, did share what he was thinking, that what an honor this is.
You've made an old man very happy. Thank you very much.
Mark, the painter, says Bud Grant was very patient in those 12 sessions that he had to sit to complete the portrait, more so than some of the presidents that he's done. Bud says that he wishes that they would find a way to make a print of this painting. He says he's got plenty of pictures of himself, but figures his kids and their grandkids wouldn't mind having a copy. In St. Paul, Rob Olson, Fox 9.
I'm fascinated how many people he had an impact on. I mean, the fact that that artist wanted to paint him, and you even said your mother in Boston.
In Boston,
was a huge
my
fan.
mother was a huge Bud Grant fan. I remember she would always, you cannot talk in the house when the Patriots are playing and when the Vikings are playing. And I remember I asked, I go, why the Vikings? And she said, Dawn, I love myself a great underdog.
Oh, wow.
And she just loved Bud Grant because he was tough, as my mom was too. So
yeah, right. Little East Coast thing.
And what people don't know is he also is in the CFL Hall of Fame.
Oh, wow.
NFL and CFL. Plus, he played in the NFL and the NBA. There's so much to Bud Grant. We're just scratching the surface.
Yeah, an incredible amount of depth there.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, Don. And stay with us here on Fox 9 as we continue to remember the life and legacy of Vikings. Tonight, Minnesota is mourning the loss of a Vikings great. Legendary Vikings coach Bud Grant has died. Grant passed away this morning at 95 years old. He was so well known in the Twin Cities community and across the state. Grant was the Vikings head coach for 18 seasons, leading the team to their 4 Super Bowl appearances, and is known as the most successful coach in franchise history. And as we remember Coach Grant and his impact on the community and so many Vikings fans and players throughout history, let's bring in Dawn Mitchell now. And Dawn, so well known not only with the Vikings franchise, but really all across the NFL here.
Across the NFL, across the world, there's so many Vikings fans around the world, and people that even didn't really like football who knew about Bud Grant, so it just spreads. And then I'm getting so many phone calls and texts from people who just loved him.
Cool.
But today I'm also talking to another former player, and we all know and love Greg Coleman. And I spoke with Greg earlier, and he talked a lot about Bud Grant. He said, you know, we had our spats, believe it or not, but we also loved each other. And this is what he had to say about how Bud was for him as a coach.
Regardless of whether you were Fran Tarkenton, Jim Marshall, Carl Eller, or a third-string tight end, there was something that he remembered about each one, and that's a rare quality. Because Bud was one of those guys that if you spoke to him in the morning and you walked by him again, 20 minutes later or after lunch, he said, hey, didn't I speak to you earlier this morning? You don't need to speak to me again. You don't need to say hello. But that was Bud. Just a remarkable, remarkable man who had a great memory about something. He said, well, if you made a mistake, 6 years into your career, he said, you know what, when you were a rookie, I remember having to tell you about that long time. He had that knowledge that was so incredible. Just a man that will be missed, a legend with a remarkable wealth of intelligence, great memories for so many people, and especially in his latter years, Don. I would say most players talk to Bud more post-career than they did when they were playing. He had so much to say, talking about family, what was important. So I will miss those conversations that we used to have back in the day.
If you were going to do a Greg Coleman Sunday sermon on the spot for Bud Grant,
oh my
what
gosh.
would you give us
Oh
from the
my
heart?
Lord. Wow. Don, you know how to pull one out, don't you? It would be very simple.
Okay.
There was an old man named Blue Eyes, and I don't mean Frank Sinatra. I'm talking about the blue-eyed coach Bud Grant, who stood on the sideline with a crew cut that didn't say much to anybody. But he was a man of very few words. But he didn't really have to say much, because looking into those pierced blue eyes, you knew what he expected from you. Not only from you, but each man that wore that purple helmet, that wore that purple jersey. It was difficult to play with each other. But he said, when you play for each other, you'll never lose. And that's old Blue Eyes, Harry Peter Bud Grant.
Oh my,
wow.
Thanks to Greg Coleman. That was amazing. On the spot, he did not know I was going to do that. And it was, thank you so much. It was just beautiful.
It was incredibly pure there. Wow. Yeah.
One interesting thing, as much as they said, Greg continued, hey, you didn't have favorites, but I'll tell you one thing. Maybe I wasn't his favorite. Maybe Carl Eller wasn't his favorite. Jim Marshall was his favorite.
That's so funny.
Carl just said because he delivered his message.
Yeah,
he was strong. Jim Marshall, so Jim out there, Bud loved you. He loved them all. Loved Jim Marshall.
Wow, a lot of people missing him tonight.
Yes, for sure.
All right.
Well, also, when we talk about Bud, there's so much more going on. He coached a lot of well-known players, like we said, Eller, Chuck Foreman, Fran Tarkenton, and so many others who are part of the Purple People Eaters that we all know and love.
Yeah, we want to take a look back at when sports director Jim Rich caught up with Coach Grant to talk about everything from coaching that team, growing up in Minnesota, and so much more. Here's Jim Rich.
It's the first thing they do when the kids get here.
Everyone knows when Bud or his grandkids are at the lake, as the clanging of the old Gordon schoolhouse bell echoes through the pines of northwest Wisconsin.
And if it's time for supper, ring the bell.
The iconic coach of the Minnesota Vikings now spends his summers here, but still stays in touch with his old team and current boss Mike Zimmer. And Bud admits he admires the guy that has his old job.
Zim has been in football a long time. He's a very, very astute football man. He's coached in different places. He's coached under other coaches. I think he's a master of his trade. There are certain traits that we share and certain philosophies that we share. And but I think the one thing that I think the most important thing coaches have to do is recognize players and talent and get them in the right spots. And he does that. But Jim has the ability to see in players their ability and their potential. And I think that's as great as his observations of players and their recognition of their potential, I think is extremely important. I think, of course, he gets a lot of help too now. You got 22 coaches, so you get a lot of input.
Like Zimmer, Grant found success by building a tough, nasty defense over the years. And Bud also found an ally in harsh Minnesota winters. Making his team tougher than the elements allowed his players to focus just on football.
I think there may be something to that, but you got to remember I was raised in this part of the world. You know, I played high school football in the snow and the cold. I played at Minnesota where we played in snow. I went to Winnipeg where we played in the cold weather. I knew that you can play in cold weather. Now, if you're from Arizona or Louisiana or Alabama, maybe you don't know that you can do that. But I knew that we could, and so I didn't want to spend any time worrying about the weather. I mean, let somebody else worry about the weather. We're not going to worry about what kind of hand warmers we're going to have or we're going to have on our feet or helmets or blankets or whatever they are. I said, we're not going to worry about it. We're going to play football. Let the other team worry about how they're going to stay warm, take up their time worrying about that. We aren't going to do that. So, and fortunately, when you have some success, they buy in. Now, if we'd have lost, then that would have been the reason we lost. You go, well, we didn't have heaters, or my hands were too cold, or something. Well, we got rid of all that.
The Hall of Fame coach was also known for his stoic, expressionless face, staring out towards the field. But that glare helped reinforce the image of a hardened man and a team determined to gain a victory that day. But Bud says that iconic look wasn't actually intentional at all.
If you know me well enough, I think I've got a normal sense of humor, and can see both sides of things. But you got to remember, in a game, I had most coaches, not all, but most coaches have a headset on. I always had a headset on. And I'm talking to the defensive coach up in the box, offensive coach, the kicking guy and the coach, and the sideline people. So I got 4 different things going on and I can't spend my time hollering at officials. I'm listening and trying to get, ingest all the information that's coming forth. And all right, next time we get the ball on 3rd and 2, what's our play? We got to know ahead of time. I got to know ahead of time what we want to call. And so but all that, I thought, I want every bit of that to go through here. So I know and I can assist in our play calling and our defenses and situations. So I didn't have time to show a lot of emotion and scream at officials. That left that to somebody else.
Before taking over the Vikings, Grant was the head man of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in the CFL, where he became the first coach ever to win 4 Grey Cup championships. It was that success that intrigued the Vikings to hire Grant as their first ever coach. However, Bud rejected the Vikings' advances.
When the Vikings came to Minnesota, Max Winter offered me the job of the Vikings. I said, I got a family, I live in Winnipeg, I like it, we're winning. And I said, I reminded him, I said, the history of coaches in an expansion team, which we were expanding at that time in the league, was getting new teams. The history, I said, is that the first year coach doesn't last. They coach for a couple, 3 years, go through all the turmoil of new coaching job, and then they get fired. The next coach comes in, and all the groundwork that the original coach did, then he benefits.
Boy, did Bud benefit. For 18 seasons, he brought unparalleled success to Minnesota, becoming the winningest coach in franchise history. And even though he didn't bring a Super Bowl championship to the Vikings, he still is proud that he did it his way and had so much success here where he grew up.
Coaches, a lot of times, are vagabonds. You know, they make a lot of, if you look at the resumes of a lot of coaches and head coaches, they've been, all over the country. And you look at the roster, the coaching rosters in the NFL, I mean, you look at those assistant coaches. Their kids have been raised in, 4 different states. I haven't been. I've been right here all of my life. And that's, going on 50 years now, and that's if you talk about accomplishments, I think I feel good being able to live in this area for that long a time and they haven't thrown me out.
Always makes you laugh.
He's one of a kind.
He was. I think it's really interesting. Of course, I didn't grow up here, didn't grow up watching him, but it's interesting that I keep hearing, well, he didn't say a lot. He was stoic. If he saw you once, he's seen you enough, basically. But yet people absolutely love this man.
I think what resonates with me growing up in New England, it's the same as Minnesota, that, you might be that way, but once you get inside, they don't let you go.
Yeah, they hold tight.
Once you've earned someone's trust and you're in, and that's how Bud Grant is. And I want to pass along my condolences to his family and to all of his friends that know him well and love him, because this is a very difficult day. But they also know there's a softer side underneath that tough exterior. And when you hit it, you're in there.
Well, there had to be for everyone to just love him so much. So.
Absolutely.
Hey, stay with us. We will be right back with much more. As we continue to remember the life and legacy of Vikings coach Bud Grant, we reflect on his life after football. We want to bring in Corin Hoggard now. And Corin, you've been watching Bud Grant for years, watching the team for years, and I'm learning that there was just so much even to Bud Grant after the Vikings.
That's right, growing up in Fargo, a big Vikings fandom there, and loved Bud Grant from, the early 80s. Can't believe that this day would come and that I would be here to report on it, but pretty sad news today, but something, just learning about the legend and what was behind him is just pretty amazing here. Grant actually had a softer side that he only showed to certain people. He was especially full of good advice. His life after coaching kept him around the Vikings, where he still has an office resembling the one he had decades ago. And he still tried to boost the team, like when he did this coin toss at a January playoff game, determined to intimidate the visiting Seahawks. He went out there in that short-sleeved polo, even though the temperature was -6 and the wind chill was way worse. Some of his friends told us they'll remember Grant's dedication to his family and his love of the outdoors. He was an avid hunter until very recently.
He was going to live life to the fullest, and he was another great example to show to Minnesotans that even if one part of your life is slowed down, there's still so much more to do.
And Mark Rosen told us Grant was like a second father to him, and he delivered 2 important pieces of advice. Never make a decision before you have to, and don't worry about things you can't control. That included those 4 Super Bowl losses, which didn't really linger in Grant's mind for long because he just couldn't change what happened.
Yeah, that's pretty tough though. Wow.
You bring up a good point. There is a famous quote when he was inducted into the Hall of Fame that feathers right off what you said. He said, if you're going to succeed, survive maybe is a better word. You've got to handle losing. You die every time you lose, but you've got to get over it.
You can't carry it with you.
You cannot carry it with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's kind of a story with the coin toss, right? I think that...
There is a backstory, so it was unbelievable, but we're going to hear from it first, right?
We will hear from...
He's 88 years old. Bud Grant, who led the Vikings to 4 Super Bowls. What, me worry? 6 below, in his golf shirt for the ceremonial coin toss.
An iconic moment so many of us remember. This was in the 2016 Vikings versus Seahawks wild card game when he came out onto the field. This is what we're talking about in just his golf shirt, no jacket. Oh my gosh.
I was there, and I was not just wearing a golf shirt, right? I had layers on, we were standing near heaters, but the backstory to this, we were just at the retirement party for Bob Hagan, now the former PR director, and he said, let me tell you, this was all Bud Grant's idea. He said, Bob, let me throw this idea by you. I want to go out there, and I'm going to just go out there in my polo shirt, and Bob's like, well, it may be 46 degrees out now, but I don't know if you have a weather app. It's going to be like minus 30 wind chill. He goes, I know, I'm going to do it. And he said, Bud Grant said, if you put your mind to it and you are determined, you can do anything for at least 10 minutes. And he did it. So that was all Bud Grant's idea, to go out there and get the crowd going and to show how tough the Vikings were.
I was going to say, it was kind of to intimidate the other side, right?
And I also think to show he still got it. So I loved it.
Yeah.
It was cold.
Dude, yeah.
I was there when we saw it, we were just like, what? So it did its job. And just to know that he was like, this is my idea and I want to do it. Oh, and I know how cold it's going to be. And I'm going to do it. You can do anything if you set your mind to it.
Yeah. Well, before we go, we just want to thank Carl Eller for stopping by and Greg Coleman for talking with us, reflecting on Coach Bud Grant's life and his impact here in Minnesota, which is absolutely huge here.
And we also want to extend our heart once again to not only Bud's immediate family, but his family is extensive. 6 children, 19 grandchildren, wow. 13 great-grandchildren. So the Bud Grant tree will continue for quite some time to come. That makes me feel better.
Yeah, for sure. And clearly, this is a man who will never be forgotten. You know, so much more to him that I'm learning along the way here than football. I mean, I knew a little bit, didn't know a lot, but I really learned a lot today, and I've learned to appreciate and respect this man that I really obviously never really knew. So just wonderful to learn all about him.
And the touch of the whistle and the come on in for his garage sale. I love the humorous parts too. That will live on.
And I want to mention we're going to put a lot of this online, so you want to check out fox9.com.